Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers. I would start this week. The first kicker, Ka'im Fairbairn of the Houston Texans. He's been great this season, and this Texan team's had a lot of trouble scoring the football when they're in the red zone, so they've had to settle for field goals majority of the season. And now with CJ Stroud banged up, and who knows if he's going to play in the upcoming game here, Week 10 versus the Jaguars. So Fairbairn the last couple weeks, Week 4 versus Tennessee 10, Week 5 at Baltimore 18, Week 7 at Seattle 8, Week 8 versus the Niners 14, and Week 9 versus the Broncos 18 fantasy points, where he actually missed a 53-yarder in that game, where he would have had a 23-point fantasy day. So Fairbairn, he's getting a lot of opportunities weekly. Like I said, this offense, they're stalling out a whole lot, but he's a kicker, obviously indoors, which is always a plus, where they're home once again versus the Jaguars. The defense, that's not that good this season. I think Fairbairn once again goes out there, and it wouldn't be surprising if it's a double-digit fantasy day for him this week. Next kicker, Eddie Piñeiro of the San Francisco 49ers. It's been a great pickup this season, and obviously a kicker with consistency all season long, where Jake Moody just wasn't that over the last few seasons with the San Francisco 49 team. So the last few weeks for Piñeiro, Week 6 at Tampa 18, Week 7 versus Atlanta 11, Week 8 at Houston, a down game 1 point, and then Week 9 bounced back with a good game at the New York Giants with 12 fantasy points. So this week for Piñeiro, decent matchup versus the Rams, a bend but don't break defense, gives up the 9th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And Piñeiro this season has had 5 games with double-digit fantasy days in the 8 games he's appeared in. So Piñeiro made the most of his opportunity. He hasn't missed a beat since he signed with this 49er team in Week 2. And this week here, like I said, versus the Rams, a bend but don't break defense, and a team you got to put points on the board against. I think Eddie Piñeiro will go out there and have a good game. Once again, next kicker, Cairo Santos of the Chicago Bears. Santos, he's out there in tons of fantasy leagues, over 85%. So Santos, he's been a solid kicker for many seasons. The Bears gave him a contract extension a couple years ago, and he did miss Week 6 and Week 7, but ever since he returned, Week 8 at Baltimore 11, and Week 9 at the Bengals 10. So 10 here versus the Giants, give up the 8th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. I know Soldier Field, this time of the year, wind, bad cold weather out there. It could be Santos. He's been a kicker where it hasn't bothered him, obviously, where he's been with the Bears for a while, so he's an under-the-radar kicker. But this week, he's definitely cracked my top 12 with a good matchup. And like I said, in a high-powered offense where everything's clicking. Caleb Williams had a big game last week, obviously. DJ Moore the last few weeks, he's getting it going. And they did all that, 47 points with Roma Dunze not doing nothing, and Colston Loveland finally having a breakout game, and Monangai out of the backfield. So the Bears, they got a good nucleus over there right now, and they're putting points on the board. Santos has definitely been a part of it, and he's a kicker to start this week. Next kicker, Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So McLaughlin, it's been a solid season for him. He's in a high-powered offense led by Baker Mayfield with this Tampa Bay Buc team. And McLaughlin, 55, 60 yards hasn't been a problem for him this season. And he's got 3 games this year with just 15 or more fantasy points. He could put him up in bunches. He's like a Fairbairn kind of is Chase McLaughlin. And now that the bye week's over for him, it's a good matchup coming up versus the Patriots here in Week 10. That's a bend but don't break defense. And like I said, most of these Tampa Bay games, they're putting points on the board. And McLaughlin, it seems like of late, at least 40, 50-yarder per game, he's attempting with a few extra points. So this week after the bye, and in a game where New England's got a good defense that don't give up a lot of touchdowns, I think McLaughlin could go out there, have a good performance, and he's a good start this week. And the 5th and final kicker I would start is Michael Badgley of the Indianapolis Colts. So Michael Badgley, they signed him a few weeks ago when Spencer Schrader tore the ACL and obviously out for the season, where he was having a good year. And the 4 games he's appeared in for the Colts is Badgley. Week 6 versus Arizona 8, Week 7 at the Chargers 4, Week 8 versus Tennessee 9, and Week 9 at the Steelers 12 fantasy points. So Week 10, a good matchup coming up versus the Atlanta Falcons. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. Badgley has a good boot, and playing indoors is always a plus as well, where this week, obviously, Indianapolis is back home after a tough loss at the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Badgley hit 2 50-plus yarders in that ball game. So yes, he goes on by in Week 11, but Week 10, what a great matchup. Like I said, versus the Falcons, he's on a high-powered offense and indoors. He's definitely a good start this week. So that's a few kickers I look to start for Week 10 of the fantasy football season.